Good morning. A nice sunny day here, but it is supposed to be pretty warm, mid-80s, I believe. So we're getting a start about 7:30 this morning. And what I'm doing first is I'm going to measure out how far out these two grape plants are from the house. And they're slightly different, so I'm going to kind of split the difference and just remember that. Now I'm using a 12 or 16 foot tape measure here, and the next part of this is going to be to determine where the three posts go. I have three spans. This one is from a basement window to the side of the house, and I'm going to remember where that halfway point is, and I'm going to mark that just with a piece of rebar. I've got 3 pieces of 2-foot rebar that are going to mark my holes. And so I'm just going to leave that for now at the midway point, kind of leaning up against the side of the house. And then I'll take a piece of rebar and I'm going to go down to the other end of the house and do the same measurement from the front side of the house to that window, and again split the difference and mark it with the piece of rebar. And now to figure out the third post, the same procedure, measure between the two windows. Those white plants are a lemon and a lime plant in the white pots. So I'm just going to kind of work around those. And again, leaving the piece of rebar to mark the midway point. And this is where I figure out that particular tape measure is not long enough. So I have my 100-foot tape measure sitting over in the grass here. I'll walk over and instead use that 100-foot tape to measure the span. And now that I know where my 3 posts are going to go, I'm going to use that measurement from before, how far out from the house to go. So I'm going to lay my tape measure down at that distance, and it was approximately 2 feet out from the house, which I think will allow us enough space between the grapevine arbor and the house. And I will mark with, now using that piece of rebar, to the back of the hole. So I'm just going to push the rebar into the ground a few inches so it will mark my hole for the post digger. And then do that again for the second and third post. Now, the things I'm going to use for the digging part of this are, I am going to use a tarp to place the dirt on so the clay doesn't go into the lawn. And I have my wheelbarrow. I have a bucket with some rocks in it that I'm going to use for the bottom of the holes. I've got a spade shovel and my post hole digger. Oh, and I do at one point go get a 2-foot pry bar because we have rocks. So first thing is going to be to kind of work in a circle using the back of that piece of rebar as the back of the hole. And I'm just making about an 8-inch circle, and I'm going to dig down just deep enough to get the sod out of the way. And then you're just going to want to grab your post hole digger and go at it. In our case now, we have a post hole digger that has a couple pieces of tape on it that my husband has marked out distances. Unfortunately, I don't know how deep he's marked them, so I do check it with a tape measure at some point in this process. And we do encounter some rocks anytime we dig around here. So that's what the pry bar is for. You'll see me kind of switching between the pry bar and the post hole digger. Now, eventually, this piece of rebar you're going to see is just going to kind of fall to the way, and it's served its purpose now, so I don't have to worry about it. In your project, you may not encounter rocks, but you may encounter roots. In that case, I highly recommend a long, narrow saw. I think it's a hand saw I think it's a keyhole saw. Or even better, get a reciprocating saw and just go to town on those roots. In this case, it was primarily small rocks. And so between this pry bar, you could use a cat's paw, or even a small piece of rebar will do the same thing to kind of help you work around whatever rocks you encounter. So we are pretty lucky today. We've had enough rain that the soil is pretty easy to work with. It's not like the hard cement type clay, dried out clay. So I hope you guys have equally good luck in your hole digging endeavors. Now I'm going to just speed up till the part where we're about ready to put the post in. This is a project that we are trying to keep low budget. So we are using an existing 10-foot post that we had. We've just cut it in two. And the third post came from my husband's, basically his childhood home. His dad had rescued the old street marker out of the back of one of the road department trucks when they were changing their street signs. So that's kind of going to be like an art installation for us. Here I am. We've finally reached our 18 inches. I'm going to throw some small rocks in the bottom of the pole before we set this pole and make sure it's square as it's going in and being backfilled. We're just going to backfill the hole with the dirt we just dug up. And you're going to want to keep checking your square on the pole front and the side to make sure that your level is even. And I'm using that pry bar to tamp down that dirt as hard as I can. We're choosing not to use concrete in this case, and we do have plans to shore this up with additional structure as needed to brace it, because I'm sure at some point we will need that. So here we're just about to wrap up this first post, and I'm just going to shift everything down to the second post once this one is all set. The middle post, the street marker, that installation went pretty easy. The only thing was we didn't cut off the end of the post. It was kind of jagged on the end. That may have been a mistake, but I did have Rod kind of hit it with the Sledge Hammer a couple times to set it into the lighter soil, the fluffier soil that was at the bottom of the hole. And then once that one's in place, we'll shift down to the third post hole. And that one we encountered a really big rock, and Rod got involved in that. Thank you, Rod. And once that post is tamped down the soil and in place, we kind of just step back and admire our work. To be continued once we have the hardware. Hi guys, Jackie with Famish Farm, and you are with us today for our Grape Arbor installation. Now, we put in about a month ago, I'll flash the date up on the screen, our first 2 grapevines. And I've wanted grapes for a long time. When we made this move from Illinois to Alabama, we've got enough property here to put up a small grapevine. So we've got 2 Suffolk grapes. They're a seedless red grape that are already in the ground, supported by T-posts. And we've started training them up that T-post. And what we're doing today, what you've just seen, is utilizing 4x4 posts that we've already had. We went ahead and did some holes for those posts. We spaced them out from the house, hopefully an appropriate distance. The only thing on that side of the house, other than the roof, is the 2 bedroom windows there. But I think we're far enough out that if we ever had to have any maintenance done on those, that we would be okay. So those 2 grape plants are going to span roughly 18.5, 19 feet, and they will be able to go in 2 directions. So I will be able to train 2 vines, a split like that, in each direction. And at some point, I would not really be upset if we were to put an arbor over those bedroom windows and train grapevines up that, just for shade, basically. That is the south-facing windows on the house, and they could use a little bit more shade. So depending on how we do with these vines, then we'll see if we can get them maintained and properly trained over the wires that we're planning on putting up. So the second half of this video is just going to be deciding which cable we're going to use, cable or wire. I guess the difference there is cost. Cable is cheaper, and the downside of that is it does stretch. I'm just not sure that there'll be an appropriate size wire at my big box store, but I've got both Home Depot and Lowe's, so certainly, right, they'd have something in stock. And I'll probably use ferrules to clamp the cables off. I see these gripper things on Amazon. I will check out the price of those too, and I've got a couple days here before. I'm not in any hurry to get this project finished, so there may be a week lapse between when we set the post and when we actually put the hardware on. But it doesn't matter, because it's not like the grapes are going to need to be trained in the next 2 days, so we've got time. So I'll do some investigating. I've seen a YouTube video with a guy doing fencing, and he was using those gripper wire ties, and I really it looked like they're easy to use. It's kind of like a zip tie, but for wire, so you can keep tightening if you need to on the gripper, but it won't go back out, so you would have to cut it off if you decide to go with that system. But anyway, might be getting ahead of myself, but we'll see what ends up happening. But thanks for watching along, and let's see how this project ends up. So day 2, I had to get up and fix something. I was coming back from the store, and I noticed that I did not account for the slope, and I wanted the wires to be running even when you're looking at the house, so they would be running like against one of the lines of brick. And with the post to the left was noticeably like 4 inches lower than the post on the right. So this morning I had to dig that last post back up and raise it up. I used a piece of tape on the house to show which grout line I wanted it to be on, and so we got that raised up. Oops. Okay, we're back. This is day 3 of the Grape Arbor project, and what we found is when we went to get our hardware from Home Depot, they did not have the wire and the ferrules and the size we needed in stock, kind of as to be expected. But they were cheaper than Amazon and Lowe's, so we went ahead and ordered them. It was going to take 5 days to ship it, but it turned out it only took 2 days, so that worked out in our favor. So we are going to be putting the hardware onto the poles and stringing the wire today, and let's get to it. A little show and tell here. You couldn't have heard me in the wind. I forgot my microphone. So here is the 9-gauge farm wire. This is 170 feet or a 10-pound spool of wire. It's really thick. I could have gone smaller. And then the aluminum ferrules to lock the the wire in place. Thought I'm going to use those crimpers. Nope, that doesn't work. And here's a package of fender washers that I'm going to make use of. And then these cute little copper tops for the 4x4 posts. They were under $1 more than the black ones. I just thought they were pretty. And that thing hanging around my neck is my Dremel, and that is what I'm going to use to cut the wire. After learning the lesson of the slope, I am making sure that I'm marking my reference point for where I want to drill. And I'm using these basement windows as my line that I want the cable to run on. Now the upper line, I've pretty much decided which one to do, but the bottom one, I'm not sure. So I marked 2 different lines, in one case 3 different lines because I measured the wrong one. But it just is going to help me stay even. This next part would be much easier with our 2-foot square, but I cannot find our big carpenter square anywhere. So we are going to use a straight edge, a little square, a pencil to make the mark, and the level to make sure it's all even. And then with that little square, I'm just going to make a little hash mark, so I've got an X to point the drill to, and it's a 3.5 foot square post, so 1 3/4 in, and we make our little hash mark. Now your drill bit, you may have trouble if you don't have longer drill bits, but I've got one that I think is a size up from 1/4, so 5/16 probably. That is going to make it just through the 3.5 inch post. Before I do that bottom hole though, I want to mark where the theoretical wires will go, and then Rod and I kind of stand back and contemplate that and figure out which line we want to actually follow for the bottom wire. And then it is on to finish the rest of those holes. Then it's on to string the wire. When we get to the pole on the other end, we'll put a fender washer first, and then that ferrule, and then we'll figure out how to crimp it. Nope, not a chance. And the rest of it was pretty gnarly, so the camera ended up tipping over, and I'll show you on the other end what we do. So now I've pulled the wire tight one time, and the vice grip there is showing me where I need to cut it. So I'll use my Dremel to get the first cut made here. And once Rod helps me here get it pulled tight and we get it crimped, we'll go ahead and cut this off again. And here's the bottom wire coming through. I have to walk back to the other end a couple times just to keep the spool going straight so it doesn't kink. And then next up is moving our crimping station down to the far end here. And it involves a cinder block, a chisel, a sledge hammer, and a hammer. Oh yeah, and this piece of duct tape to hold the fender washer against the wood so I don't slam it with the hammer. The concrete block is on the bottom, and then I've got the sledge hammer standing up, and then the chisel on this end, I can't remember if it was on top of the sledge hammer or underneath it, and I'm sorry the angle of the camera didn't catch all that. I think we get it on the other end. And this is heavily edited for the F word too. So on this view, you can see the concrete block on the bottom, then the sledgehammer, and then we slide the chisel in there and start hammering while Rod is pulling, and that doesn't go so well, so we're going to switch places. And finally, we get the planets all aligned, and it is crimped. And then we pull the Dremel out again, get the burr off the end of the wire, pound that down, and then a shot of what it looks like on the other end. And then our copper caps. And I'm just going to put a dot of liquid nails on each corner, and I think that'll hold. Got to get my liquid nails so it will flow. Here we go. Then onto the middle post. And finally, the last post. So here's the completed project. Let's call it 95% complete. Both posts, end posts, are going to need to be reinforced. And I'm planning on just a wire coming out of the top and then down to the metal stake, the dog tie down, I think is what they're called. We'll see how that does. And pretty happy though. The grapes look very happy. What do you think, guys?